Hey everyone, welcome back to our channel. Today we are going to talk about Lalleshwari. But before we get started, if you're new here, be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an upload. And if you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and leave a comment down below to let me know your thoughts. Alright, let's get started. As in the rest of India, the middle of the 14th century was a period of religious and moral fermentation in Kashmir. Buddhism had practically disappeared from the valley, though we find mention of Buddhist priests and viharas in the later Rajataranginis. Tilkacharya, described as a Buddhist, was a minister of Zainul Abidin. Most of the Buddhist theologians and saints, finding the valley uncongenial, had left for Ladakh and Tibet. The long period of political instability which followed the peaceful and enlightened reign of Avantivarman, 855 to 83 AD, was responsible for the ossification of the predominant religion, Shaivism, into elaborate and complicated rituals which dominated all social and cultural activities. Shaktism, born of the love for Durga worship, had degenerated into grotesque forms of rites and ceremonies. Vaishnavism was not a strong element in the religious fabric of the valley, but in the 11th century it received further nourishment from the teachings of Ramanuja, who travelled all the way from Madras to Kashmir to fight Shaivism at its fountainhead. And with the destruction of temples and images by several Hindu kings like Harsha, as well as by Muslim zealots, Hindu worship was driven to the seclusion of the home or of natural, Swayambhu, images, rocks, or ice formations, or springs. Sanskrit became the domain of the learned few, the common man having taken to a form of Prakrit which, though retaining its essentials, was yet wholly different from the language of the gods. Impact of Islam. In this troubled period of political uncertainty and changing social values, the people of the valley were subjected to the impact of Islam. From a close contact between the two religions and their deep influence on each other, there resulted the evolution of what may be called medieval reformers or mystics. For more than 200 years Islam had, in Central Asia and Persia, been similarly influenced by the teachings and dogmas of Mahayana Buddhism and Upanishadic philosophy, resulting in the emergence of a cult of Islamic mystics. Fortunately, the new religion entered the valley in this form, being carried there by enlightened Sufis like Bulbul Shah. With their humanistic approach to religion, they found a ready and sympathetic response from the Kashmiris, already permeated with the teachings of mystic saints and seers. For it was during this period of religious fermentation that a need had been felt for a new approach to religion, embracing all creeds and castes, appealing to the heart rather than the head. Thanks to its rich religious and philosophic traditions, Kashmir rose to the occasion and produced a number of mystics and saints who, by their teachings and their lives of complete self-abnegation, were the living embodiments of true religion and morality. Mother Lalla appears. Foremost among them was a great mystic seer, Lalleshwari, popularly known as Lal Dead, Mother Lalla, who profoundly influenced the thought and life of her contemporaries and whose sayings still touch the Kashmiri's ear, as well as the chords of his heart, and are freely quoted by him as maxims on appropriate occasions. She was born in about the middle of the 14th century of the Christian era in the time of Sultan Alauddin. Lal's parents lived at Pandrendan, ancient Puranadhisthana, some 4.5 miles to the southeast of Srinagar. She was married at an early age, but was cruelly treated by her mother-in-law, who nearly starved her. This story is preserved in a Kashmiri proverb: whether they killed a big sheep or a small one, Lalla had always a stone for her dinner, an allusion to her mother-in-law's practice of putting a lumpy stone on her platter and covering it thinly with rice, to make it look quite a big heap to others. And yet she never murmured. Her father-in-law accidentally found out the truth. He got annoyed with his wife and scolded her. This incident invited more curses on Lalla. Her mother-in-law poisoned the ears of her son with all sorts of stories. Ultimately, the anomalies and cruelties of worldly life led her to renunciation, and she discovered liberty in the life of the spirit. She pursued yoga under Siddha Shrikant, until she succeeded in reaching the abode of nectar. But she did not stop there. All around her was conflict and chaos. Her countrymen and women needed her guidance. She had a mission to perform, and well and effectively she did it. Her life and sayings were mainly responsible in molding the character of her people and setting up tradition of love and tolerance which characterizes them even today. As wandering preacher, eventually she gave up her secluded life and became a wandering preacher. She led a severely ascetic life, clad in the bareness of one who had forsaken comforts, and by example and precept conveyed her teachings to the masses. Like Meera, she sang of Shiva, the great beloved, and thousands of her followers, Hindus as well as Muslims, committed to memory her famous Vakyas. There is a high moral teaching which Lalla demonstrated when during her nude state a gang of youthful rowdies were mocking her. A sober-minded cloth vendor intervened and chastised them. On this she asked the vendor for 2 pieces of ordinary cloth, equal in weight. She put them on either shoulder and continued her wandering. On the way some had salutations for her and some had jibes. For every such greeting she had a knot in the cloth, for the salutations in the piece on the right, and for the jibes in the piece on the left. In the evening after her round, she returned the pieces to the vendor and had them weighed. Neither had, of course, gained or lost by the knots. She thus brought home to the vendor and her disciples that mental equipoise should not be shaken by the manner people greeted or treated a person. So that her teachings and spiritual experiences might reach the masses, she propagated them in their own language. She thus laid the foundations of the rich Kashmiri literature and folklore. More than 30% of the Kashmiri idioms and proverbs derive their origin from her Vakyas, spiritual and philosophical Vakyas. These Vakyas or sayings are an aggregate of yoga philosophy and Saivism, expressive of high thought and spiritual truth, precise, apt and sweet. Her quatrains are now rather difficult to understand as the language has undergone so many changes, and references to special yogic and philosophic terms are numerous therein. Some of these sayings have been collected and published by Dr. Grierson, Dr. Barnett, Sir Richard Temple and Pandit Anand Kaul, and apart from the consideration that they explain the Seva philosophy of Kashmir through the Kashmiri language, they exemplify the synthesis of cultures for which Kashmir has always been noted. Lalla fills her teachings with many truths that are common to all religious philosophy. There are in it many touches of Vaishnavism, the great rival of Saivism, much that is strongly reminiscent of the doctrines and methods of the Muhammadan Sufis who were in India and Kashmir well before her day, and teachings that might be Christian with biblical analogies. Though Indians' knowledge of Christianity must have been very remote and indirect at her date, Lalla is no believer in good work in this or in former lives, in pilgrimages or austerities. In one of her sayings she criticizes the cold and meaningless way in which religious rituals are performed. God does not want meditations and austerities. Through love alone canst thou reach the abode of bliss. Thou mayst be lost like salt in water, still it is difficult for thee to know God. All labor, to be effective, must be undertaken without thought of profit and dedicated to Him. Exhorting her followers to stick fast to ideals of love and service to humanity, paying no thought to the praise or condemnation that might follow from their observance, she says, "Let them jeer or cheer me. Let anybody say what he likes. Let good persons worship me with flowers. What can any one of them gain, I being pure? If the world talks ill of me, my heart shall harbor no ill will. If I'm a true worshipper of God, can ashes leave a stain on a mirror?" She is a strong critic of idolatry as a useless and even silly work and adjures the worshippers of stocks and stones to turn to yogic doctrines and exercises for salvation. Idol is of stone, temple is of stone. Above, temple, and below, idol, are one. Which of them wilt thou worship, O foolish Pandit? Cause thou the union of mind with soul. She further castigates the fanatical followers of the so-called religions in the following apt saying, "O mind, why hast thou become intoxicated at another's expense? Why hast thou mistaken true for untrue? Thy little understanding hath made thee attached to other's religion, subdued to coming and going, to birth and death. But Lalla is not a bigot. She constantly preaches wide and even eclectic doctrines. Witness the following and many other instances. It matters nothing by what name the Supreme is called. He is still the Supreme. Be all links to all men. The true saint is the servant of all mankind through his humility and loving kindness. It matters nothing what a man is or what his work of gaining his livelihood may be, so long as he sees the Supreme properly. She puts no value on anything done without the saving belief in yogic doctrine and practice, one of the results of which is the destruction of the fruits of all work, good or bad. The aspirant should try to attain perfection in this life. He only requires faith and perseverance. Shiva is with a fine net spread out. He permeates the mortal coils. If thou whilst living canst not see him, how canst thou when dead? Take out self from self after pondering over it. She is a firm believer in herself. She has become famous and talks of the wine of her sayings as something obviously precious, and alludes often to her own mode of life, fully believing she has obtained release. I saw and found I am in everything. I saw God effulgent in everything. After hearing and pausing, see Shiva, the house is his alone. Who am I? Lalla. The removal of confusion caused among the masses by the preachings of zealots was the most important object of her mission. Having realized the absolute truth, all religions were to her merely paths leading to the same goal. Shiva pervades every place and thing. Do not differentiate between Hindu and Mussalman. You art intelligent, recognize thine own self. That is the true acquaintance with God. The great mystic. The greatness of Lalla lies in giving the essence of her experiences in the course of her yoga practices through the language of the common man. She has shown very clearly the evolution of the human being, theory of Nada, the worries and miseries of a jiva and the way to keep them off. The different stages of yoga with the awakening of the kundalini and the experiences at the sixth plexi have been elucidated by her. Much can, indeed, be said on her work as a poet and more, perhaps, on her work in the spiritual realm. But at a time when the world was suffering from conflict, social, political and economic, her efforts in removing the differences between man and man need to be emphasized. The composite culture and thought she preached and the orders she founded was an admixture of the non-dualistic philosophy of Saivism and Islamic Sufism. As long back as the 13th century she preached non-violence, simple living and high thinking and became thus Lalla Arifa for Mohammedans and Lalleshwari for Hindus. She was thus the first among the long list of saints who preached medieval mysticism which later enwrapped the whole of India. It must be remembered that Ramananda's teaching and that of those that came after him could not have affected Lalla, because Ramananda flourished between 1400 and 1470. While Kabir sung his famous dohas between 1440 and 1518, and Guru Nanak between 1469 and 1538, Tulsidasa did not come on the scene till 1532, whereas Meera flourished much later. 4 famous poems by Lal Ded. First poem, I have seen an educated man starve, a leaf blown off by bitter wind. Once I saw a thoughtless fool beat his cook. Lalla has been waiting for the allure of the world to fall away. Second poem, I might scatter the southern clouds, drain the sea, or cure someone hopelessly ill, but to change the mind of a fool is beyond me. Third poem, I came by the public road but won't return on it. On the embankment I stand, halfway through the journey. Day is gone. Night has fallen. I dig in my pockets but can't find a cowrie shell. What can I pay for the ferry? Fourth poem, I, Lalla, entered the gate of the mind's garden and saw Shiva united with Shakti. I was immersed in the lake of undying bliss. Here, in this lifetime, I've been unchained from the wheel of birth and death. What can the world do to me? The life lessons that one can learn from Lal Ded are not only spiritual, they are also deeply ethical and inspiring. Here was a brave, young, solitary woman, with a profound understanding of the human condition, striving with acuity and determination to find a way out of the confusing morass of everyday life, social relations, and emotional entanglements to the clarity and bliss of self-discovery. As her verses indicate, She stood aloof and alone in the face of apparent social censure for being such an intrepid and unconventional woman, and became her own light. Thus she says, "Whether the world venerates me or shuns me, I alone will bear the consequences of my detached actions, which are offered to my own self. So wherever I go, I will prosper. Let people abuse and taunt me, or let them shower petals in adoration. Nothing affects me. I am pure consciousness. Only when I can withstand censure will my inhibitions break down. Let my pride be torn asunder. Let not attacks bother me." No ordinary person is capable of such exceptional self-awareness and fortitude. This is why Lal's greatness and qualities such as indomitable courage, steely perseverance, and scintillating intellect can hardly be explained by any domestic challenges she may have faced in her early life. Lal was perhaps, above all, an extraordinary individual who rose high above the petty concerns and bondage of society in her pursuit of self-realization. As she says, "When the inner light lit up within me, off went the light outside." What is even more fascinating is that the dazzling knowledge she arrived at was not through being highly educated or versed in scriptures or complex ritual techniques, mantra, tantra. As she avers, "I was born simple and simple I will die." Hence, in a strong reminder of that other great Indian saint from the 15th century, Kabir, who, though unlettered, preached high Upanishadic Advaita 3 in the simplest of tongues on the streets of Banaras, Lal's knowledge of the true nature of reality and the self was intuitive and experiential. She belongs to a long line of brilliant and pious souls that came from the sacred land of Kashmir. In our consumerist and hyper-connected modern world today, we are ironically cut off from our own inner selves. As a result, we suffer as a society from great violence and turmoil. Today, more than ever before therefore, Lal Ded's luminous utterances shine brightly from across the centuries as a beacon of salvation and show us the way to redeem our true selves. And that's a wrap for today's video. I really hope you enjoyed watching and learned something new. If you did, please give this video a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. Also, be sure to hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload. If you have any questions or comments about today's video, feel free to leave them down below and I'll do my best to respond to each and every one. Thanks so much for watching and I'll see you in the next one.